In this tutorial, I'm going to walk through how you can deploy a Vue CLI 3 application to Heroku. Now, in order to do this, there are a few prerequisites. First, you have to have Git installed on your system. Now, you can check by going into the terminal, and you can simply type Git, and this, as long as you don't get an error, then that means that you have Git installed on your system and you're ready to use it. You also need to have the Heroku account and CLI installed. So to have a Heroku account, that means that you need to be able to go to Heroku.com and you have some form. Oh, it'd be helpful if I spelled it correctly. Heroku.com, just like this. And it means that you have an account here. And it's free to have an account, but you may not be able to have the website up for free. You may need to pay a monthly fee if you're wanting to host it. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. So you need to have that, and you also have to have the CLI installed. So you can verify that by performing the same test that you did with Git. If you type Heroku into the terminal and you don't get an error, but instead you get these list of commands, that means that you have the Heroku CLI installed. So that is going to be the next step. Now let's go back here and then let's go to our checklist. And then obviously you have to be using Vue CLI 3, and this is specifically made for a CLI 3 application. The same rules will apply. The only difference would be if you're using version 2, the file system is going to look quite a bit different, but the commands that we're going to run here and everything that we're going to do is going to be very similar. So if you're following along and you're still using Vue CLI 2, that's perfectly fine. So let's get started. So these are the steps that we're going to take. Before I even do that, I do need to create a Git repository. So I'm going to say git init, and then I can say git, oh, and I have a few shortcut keys. I won't use those just so it's not confusing. I'll say git add dot, which will add everything, and then git commit -m initial commit. And so now we are set. Now this is giving a warning, but don't worry about that. That's just for grep. So it looks like everything worked. If you type git status, then you can see we're on branch master and nothing is there to commit. Now, one other item that you have to make sure if you're using Heroku is you need to go into your gitignore directory, and right now it is saying to ignore this dist directory, but we actually want to have that. So I'm going to remove that from gitignore, and in a little while I'll talk about it, but I'll talk about why that is important. Okay, so now with all of that, let's go back into the terminal, and so now we need to add a start command. So let's come into our package.json, and we'll give ourselves a little more room. In fact, I'll just close out of this for right now. And so when I say a start command, anytime that you need to create a custom script in the Vue CLI, you do it right here. So I'm going to come and add one more script. And so this is going to be start. And the reason for this is because Heroku, by default, when you push up a node-based application, the command they try to run is going to be node start. And so that's going to, or npm start. And so that's going to be something that you want run right here. So we need to make sure we have that command. And now what we want to have happen when it says npm start, we want to say node and then server.js. So what this means is that when Heroku receives this application, it is going to recognize right away that is a JavaScript node-based application. So it's going to run this command. From there, what's going to happen is we are going to set up a server.js file. This is going to manage our entire server for us, and we're going to say, okay, I want you to run node. So I want you to run the node command and then call this server.js file. And as you can tell, this is not set up yet. So we're going to do that in a little bit, but not yet, because we still have a few more things that we want to do. Inside of that server.js file, we're going to use the Express server. So we need to make sure that we add that into the application. So in order to do that, you can type npm and then install -- save Express. And that is going to go and grab the Express server, which if you've never used it before, it's a very lightweight node-based server. So it will allow us to have a built-in server directly in our application, but it is very fast and efficient. And it also performs one incredibly helpful task that I will also discuss in a little bit, and we'll add that to our server.js file. So let's see the next step. Okay, so now we're at the step where we can create this file. So you can just you want to do it at the very root of the application. So just come here and click on new file, type server.js, and let's close out of the terminal. And now we're going to create this file. So I'm first going to set up some variables. So I'm going to require Express. So here, the way that you can do that is you have to use the common JS syntax. You can't use the latest version of the import. So we're going to use require statements. And so we're going to require Express. Now we're also going to set up a port. And the way that this works is whenever Heroku is running, it's going to set up what is called a configuration variable. And so what we can do is say process.env. So this is going to grab the configuration environment variable, and then dot all caps port. So this is going to check for the environment, and it's going to see if a port has been established. If it has, then it's just going to use that port. If not, so we're going to use the double pipe. So this is going to say or 8080. And so what this means is that if it finds an environment variable called port, it's going to use that port. So if it's on Heroku and Heroku says, okay, I want you to use port 3000, it'll use port 3000. It really is just going to use whatever the system tells it to use, which makes it nice and dynamic. But if that's not set, then it's going to say, okay, let's just fall back and let's use port 8080. So now that we have that, now we're going to instantiate the application, or instantiate the server. So I'm going to say const app equals express, and it's a function, so we're just going to call it like a normal function. And then we have some configuration to do here. We first have to tell the server where to find the files. So I'll say app.use and then express.static, because what we're going to do when we run our bundle command that's going to generate all of the files, it's going to create a static website for us. And so all of our Vue code can't be processed by the browser. What we need to do is we actually need to convert it into just plain vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, because that's what the browser can work with. So we are going to say express.static. So I want you to run this static function, and I want you to pull in these files. Now, the way we can access this is by saying double underscore and then dir name, just like this. So that's short for directory name, plus, and then inside of a string, we are going to reference that dist directory, which is short for distribution. So anytime you see this dist directory, what that means is that is where all of your compiled code is going to go, and that's what the browser can actually read. So now that we have that, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little trick here. If you've ever gone to an application, or if you've ever tried to push up an application that is a single page app, like a Vue app, an Angular app, or a React app, what happens, and let's do a little demo of this really quick, is let's pretend that Heroku is a single page application. If you clicked on a route here, so like say I clicked on this support link, and it would work perfectly as a Vue app. But what would happen is if you hit refresh, right now this will work. But if you didn't do the little trick I'm going to show you, and you're using a single page application, the system, so the server, is going to go and try to find a file called support. But remember, whenever you're using a single page application, we really just mock routes. The routes aren't even real. They're more just there to help people see where they're at inside of the application. And so if you tried to send somebody to a route in a Vue app, then it would break because it wouldn't look for the app. It would look for the app URL, and then it would say, oh, /support. And then it would look on the server for something like support.html. It wouldn't find that file, and then it would throw an error. And so what we need to do is we need to add in a little trick. So we're going to say app.get. This is a function provided from Express. And now we're going to pass it a regular expression. So I'm going to say get /dot**, which just means I want you to get everything after the slash and then end it with another slash. So this is going to essentially take care of all routes. And now you're going to pass it a function with the request and response as the arguments here. And then inside of curly braces, what we're going to do is we're actually going to mock the file. We're going to capture all of the requests, and then we're going to send all of the requests to the index.html file. So I'm going to say res, which is short for response, send file, which is a built-in function provided by Express. And now we'll say dir name plus that dist directory again /index.html. Okay, so if this looks weird to you, if you've never seen anything like this before, it's actually pretty simple once you actually understand how it works. All we're saying is that I want you to capture all routes. So no matter what someone goes to, so say that we're back at our fake Vue application that's in production right now. If someone goes to support, this is going to get rerouted. Instead of trying to find the support file, it's going to go on the server and it's going to get rerouted to this index.html file, which is exactly where all of the, that's where all of our application is stored, is in that file. Now, if someone goes to something like this, a bunch of just gibberish, they would also get routed there. So that's all this is doing. Because this is a single page application, every single entry point into the app is through this index.html file. So what we're saying here is whatever the route is, I want you to actually redirect it, push them to the index.html file. And if you do that, it is going to, the index file, because it's storing the Vue app, it is going to be able to know how to handle those routes. So that's what we're doing right there. And that is critical. I've run into so many people who've had bugs where they pushed up a single page application and it looked like it worked and the routing worked, everything like that was just perfect until they tried to refresh the page on an outside route and then it broke and they got some very weird kind of 404 errors. So make sure that you've added that. Now, after that is in place, we can call app again, and then we want to listen for the port. Now, remember, the port is what we set up right here. And then we can also, just to make sure everything's working, we can just console log something out and say server started, just like this. Hit save, and now we have our server.js file. So let's go back to our checklist. So we created that start command, we installed Express, we set up the server.js file. Now it's time to actually build this. You've seen us reference the dist directory multiple times, but you may be curious, where is it? Well, that's what we're going to do now. So let's open up the terminal one more time and run npm run build. So what this is going to do is it's going to take all of our files. So this entire Vue application, it's going to go through our source directory and it's going to take all of this and then it's going to go and it is going to convert that into something the browser can actually work with. So if you click now, you see this dist directory, and the reason why we needed to make sure we removed it from gitignore is because this is what Heroku is going to use in production. So anytime that you make a change, if you're following this workflow, there are ways of automating it, I will say that, but for right now, I think it's important to understand what's going on here. So anytime you'd make a change, you actually also need to run this build command again to update the dist directory. Now, if you click here, you may notice we don't have any Vue code here. Instead, let me get out of these files and also close the terminal. Now you can see that we have our index.html file and it's all minified, so it looks kind of weird because it's all on one line, but that's for performance reasons. This is the same index.html file that we referenced here. So this is the entry point for the entire application. So this is where everything in the app is going to be called. Then we have JavaScript code. So all of the Vue code that you create is going to get processed and it's going to be converted into something that looks like this. Now, if you ever wonder, why in the world do I need to use a framework like Angular or Vue or React? It's because you really do not want to write code like this, but this is what your Vue code actually gets converted into. So that is all of that, and then we also do the same thing with the compiled CSS files. So with all of that in place, make sure if you type git status that you add all of these. So I'm going to say git add all, git commit -m, and we'll say built for Heroku. And now what we can do is if you have a GitHub account, you could push this up to GitHub. But what we're going to do is we're going to skip that process and we're just going to create our Heroku account or create our Heroku instance here. So I'm going to say Heroku create devcamp Vue 3 deployment demo. It's a very long name, but this is one I don't think anyone else has taken this name, so we should be good. So I'm going to hit enter. Oh, and actually is a little bit too long. So let's say just devcamp Vue 3 deployment, or we'll just do it just like this, deploy. And you can name yours whatever you want. Just one thing to note if you're new to Heroku is this name has to be unique. So no one else in the world can use it because this is going to be the subdomain for your application. So I'm going to hit enter and there you go. Our app has been created. Now we still need to push to it. And I'm going to tell you that this is going to work, but it's going to get an error. And the reason is, and the reason why I'm keeping the error in here is because I want to show you how to debug it. So I'm just going to add that as a little spoiler alert. But now to push up to here, you first make sure, type git status, make sure you don't have any other changes to commit. And now you can say git push Heroku master. And so what this is going to do is this is going to take all of this code and then it's going to pass it to the Heroku app engine. When we ran Heroku create, what Heroku did is it created a connection between their server and our system. And so now when we're pushing this up, it's pushing it up to that app that is created. Now, the reason why this is going to run into an error is because Heroku allows you to have a certain amount of free server time each month. And so if you've not hit your max limit, then you're probably going to be fine. But because I have so many apps on there, I actually have hit my limit. And so I want to keep this in here just in case you do, and you don't. That way I don't want you to think that you did something wrong. It may just be a problem where you ran out of free time. So right here you can see, let's come up. So it looks like everything worked, and let's also give ourselves a little bit more room. So the build succeeded, everything looks like it worked on that side. Now, if you ever want to see where everything is located, you can type git remote -v, and you can see that we have deployed to here. This is not the URL where we're going to find the application. This is the remote Git repository that Heroku is storing our code. Now, if we were to go, let me grab this name one more time because it's a pretty long one. So devcamp-vue-3-deploy. So let's go into Chrome and go to that URL. So devcamp-vue-3-deploy.herokuapp.com. So whatever name you gave your application, it's going to be that name .herokuapp.com, not Heroku, Heroku app. And if you then type enter, you're going to see this application error. That is because we ran out of space, or I ran out of space on my personal Heroku account. Now, the way that you can test this is, and this is part of why I wanted to keep this error going in the tutorials, because if you run into that error, the best way to debug this is type Heroku logs-n and then say 250. This is going to bring the last 250 lines of the logs for our Heroku server. And if I run this, then it's going to give me the error. So right here you can see I have it, the build succeeded and everything worked, but right here, this is the problem. It says idling because quota is exhausted. So if you get this error and then you have this stopping all processes, it is simply telling you that nothing's the matter with your code. It is simply a problem that you have used all of your free time. So that's all you have to do. Now let's get it fixed. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to log in and I'm going to hide my credentials and I'll show you how you can get it fixed. Now, if you do have a situation where you don't want to pay for this, then that's perfectly fine, but that means that you will not be able to see your application until the next month comes around and you get all of your free time back up there. But the way that you can do it is you can search for that app. So you can search for all of your apps right here. So I'm going to say devcamp Vue 3 deploy. You can see that it has it right there. And then you can either, there's a couple ways that you can fix it. You can click on configure dynos and then click upgrade to hobby and then click here. The way that I'm going to do it is, and you can see that $7 a month. So don't do this if you're just testing it right now and you're learning about it, unless you feel like spending $7. But if you are actually wanting to host the website on Heroku, then pay for that. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have the Bottega account take care of it. So if you're working with teams on Heroku, I can go to Bottega here, click on transfer app, and then that's automatically going to put it in the team account, and then it's going to make it active. So now I can click on open app right here, and if everything works, then it will work. And as you can see, it did. So that is looking really good. Now you can even test this out. If I click on about, you can see right here, if I hit refresh, that our routes are still working. Now, one last thing that I want to do, and I know this video's definitely gone on for a while, but I think this is a really important topic, so hopefully you find it helpful, is if you notice this route right here, notice how it has this little hash mark? Well, that is the way that that's the way that Vue has their route set up by default. But that's pretty ugly. You really never want to do that. The reason why they did that is because it's specifically because of what we talked about in our server.js file. So right here, when we added our little workaround for getting all routes to be mapped to index.html, it was because by default, Vue tries to put this little hash in there so that that's their workaround. But I don't like that, so I'm going to show you how to fix that. And then also it's going to also teach you how you can update your application on Heroku. So the way that you can fix that is you can go into your source directory, go into your router.js file, and this is different. If you're following along with Vue CLI 2, then you would go into your router directory and then index.js. But now we have a dedicated router.js file. You can come right here and then type mode right under router, and then as a string, history, hit save. Now what this is going to do is it's going to bypass the default little annoying hash route delimiter, and then it's going to now work more like a real application. It's going to use what is called the Windows history tool. So this now is going to allow our single page application route to look exactly like a real route. So let's now rebuild. So I'll say that we want to do npm run build. So our changes will actually take effect. And then I'm going to create another git commit, and then we can deploy. So here git add dot git commit -m, and they'll say upgraded routes. And now we can say git push Heroku master. And so hopefully by going through this a few times, it'll kind of get you in the routine of seeing exactly what the process is in order to deploy. And then I definitely recommend for you to reference, as it's going through, I'll show it to you again, reference this checklist. For the most part, this is accurate. There's one thing I do want to add before I add this to the show notes. If you may have remembered, we needed to make sure to remove the dist directory from gitignore. So that is very important, because if you don't do that, then Git is not going to be aware of your application, and then because of that, it's not going to have a dist directory to look to, and so then it's not going to have any entry point. It's not going to have any code to actually show in the browser. So that's an important thing to understand. So now let's come back to our application. Let's go back to the home page, but let's remove the little hash, hit enter, and now it's working perfectly. If I click about, now notice how it removed that hash. I can still hit refresh, and everything here is working. So in review, that is how you can deploy a Vue CLI version 3 application to Heroku.